This is the CBS News special report. I'm Tony DeCopel in New York. We are coming on the air tonight because in a few moments, President Trump will be giving a speech. It's a speech expected to address safety and security of American elections, a topic, of course, that the president has talked a lot about for years now, at times almost constantly. And honestly, much of what the president has said on this topic has been false. Most notably, of course, the claim that he won the 2020 election when, of course, he did not. Because of this, there is an argument that it's irresponsible to air the president's speech tonight. But this speech will be made, it will be news, and it's our job to cover the news. And so we are. My CBS News colleagues and I are reporting tonight along with you to make sense of it as you will, and we will do it together. What it means for the country, what is true, and what is not. I want to start with Ed O'Keefe and Major Garrett. Major's here with me on set. Major, thank you very much for joining us.
Great, Tony.
So we got a briefing from a White House official who told us this is not going to be a speech relitigating 2020, nor is it going to be a speech in which the president alleges that votes were changed back in 2020. So if you take those two things out, what's he likely to say? There
are two important things that I think reasonably to our viewers, Tony, will cause them concern and alarm. And then we're going to talk about those things. One, the president will declassify information, saying that based on information the administration has culled through and is declassifying for the first time, between 2020 and 2023, China gained access to 220 million voter rolls in this country. That's nearly all available voter rolls. How did China do this? You can purchase them, you can Google them, and in some cases you have to hack or buy them, or hack someone who bought them, okay? So that's in voter rolls in China's possession. It's not new news. It's something that we were tracking as a government for years and years. There was actually a memo about this in January of 2020. But the administration does not contend that access to those voter rolls in any way changed information within them, changed votes, or in any way affected an election. So it is a data gathering operation by a foreign adversary, in this case China, and the president will highlight that. There's another thing the president's going to talk about that I think will click in our viewers' ears. In cooperation with 12 states, the administration believes it has found 25,000 non-citizens on voter rolls. And it extrapolates from that the potential of 250,000 non-citizen on voter rolls in our country. Again, that's a number that would probably, to our viewers, cause some sense of concern. One thing to know about that, just because you're on a voter roll does not mean you're an active participant. Lots of Americans are on rolls and don't cast fat ballots in elections. And states do a pretty good job of trying to scrub their voter rolls on a regular basis to look for this, but the administration will ask the states to be more aggressive in this space. But 25,000, is that what you said? Yes. Across 12 states? Yes. With how many millions of voters? Well, let's go back to the 220 million. That's almost all the voter rolls. So it's a very small percentage of a very large registration voter roll across all 50 states. 68 million voters is the number I have here from an earlier briefing. Right. So you've got 25,000 potential non-citizens out of 68 million. That's the find here. And then you mentioned, going back to the China thing, you said this is not new information that China is harvesting this public voter data. So why is it important now? There was an intelligence community awareness of it. This is a statistical description of the volume of it, which is the new declassified component of it. All right, so the president's going to take these two things together, and we'll see what he does with it, and we'll watch it closely. I want to go to Ed O'Keefe, who is with us. He's on the North Lawn of the White House. You know, Ed, one of the questions many Americans will have at home tonight is, when so much is going on in the country with prices, with war in Iran, with wildfire smoke, people can hardly breathe across multiple states at this hour. And the president is drawing the nation's attention once again to this subject. Why?
Especially with fresh violence just tonight again across the Middle East. There are a few reasons for this, Tony, according to the White House. First of all, it's a classic political base building exercise. Presidents do this in even-numbered years to try to bring out their base. And while it has been, as you said, a personal concern of the president, something he talks about on a regular basis, it also is for his most loyal supporters. And he's trying to remind them that it remains a concern of his and that he's trying to do things to address those concerns. Part of that is pushing Congress to pass a national voting standards law that would establish federal voter ID and citizenship verification, despite the fact the Constitution calls on states to to manage and carry out elections. Critics of the president, some who used to work for him, and Democrats especially, over the last several months, but especially again today, are saying this is also designed to start laying the groundwork for the possible deployment of federal agents, military troops, or other federal intervention at polling sites across the country or in key states that are holding some of the most competitive elections. We'll see if the president addresses that in his remarks tonight, Tony.
Well, Ed, on that topic, the president is in the East Room of the White House, and he's begun to speak now. He's been talking about the economy, and he's been touching on immigration. Let's listen in.
Our armed forces, and we have the strongest and most powerful military by far anywhere in the world. I built it during my first term, and unfortunately, we're forced to use it now. We won in Venezuela, which is now working with us to produce millions and millions of barrels of oil. We are likewise winning big in Iran, and you will see the fruits of that labor very, very shortly. America is back and doing really well, but we still have a major challenge that must be urgently addressed, because no country can be great without fair and honest elections. You have to trust your country, because if there can be no trust, there can be no greatness. And that's very simple. No trust, no greatness. For many years, I've called for bold, swift, and decisive action to protect the integrity of America's elections. Every American deserves to know that when they cast their vote, that vote will be counted accurately in a system, and that is to make that system secure, one where cheating and interference are not just difficult, but virtually impossible. Unfortunately, the system we have today falls catastrophically short of that standard. Tonight, I'm announcing the immediate declassification and release of critical intelligence revealing shocking vulnerabilities in our election infrastructure. This evidence shows that the election system we have dangerously exposes, and really exposes like levels never thought possible, to hacking, exploitation, and foreign interference. Just as disturbingly, this vital information has for many years been covered up and hidden from you, the American people, our beautiful, our great American people. But that all changes right now. The documents we will release starting tonight have been gathered by the White House Government Transparency Task Force, a great group of people, along with the staff of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, supported by our top intelligence agency chiefs, who have all personally reviewed the findings. We are presenting this evening and fully confirmed their authenticity. You can see these documents for yourself at whitehouse.gov. That's whitehouse.gov. Go check it out. Our purpose in disclosing this information is not to weaken confidence in election, but to earn that confidence by confronting vulnerabilities and correcting them very, very quickly. And that's what we're doing. The documents cover 5 major areas of concern. First, they show that over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening. This data loss presents an unprecedented election security nightmare. The intelligence even shows that China assigned a data exploitation unit specifically to this new project. Compounding the travesty, the second set of documents we are releasing reveals that members of the deep state, very, very famous group of people, in many cases, in our intelligence agency work to actively suppress and downplay information about the extent of China's sinister election meddling. covering it up from both the president and the American people like nobody thought was possible. U.S. spy agencies began learning about the compromise of voter registration files in 2020 when they discovered that tens of millions of voter data, think of that, tens of millions of voters' data in 18 states have been bought, stolen, or hacked by China. Yet those responsible for sounding the alarm instead kept the information secret and hidden. They did not disclose to me as president or to anyone else, and to the best of our knowledge, they did not inform Congress. In fact, all they kept saying is, this is the most secure election in the history of our country, a standard, very pat line that was divvied out to say. The cover-up of this colossal security breach is even more disturbing in light of the additional information showing that China engaged in other election-related activities to undermine my first administration and our 2020 campaign. They did not want, and they just didn't want it. They fought like hell not to have it, Donald Trump, to win, and for good reason. As the documents we are releasing show, CIA reporting explicitly stated, and I quote, in mid-2018, the Chinese Communist Party's policy was to leverage all domestic and foreign elements that were opposed to the U.S. president in an effort to reduce the U.S. president's votes and make him resign or prevent his re-election. Isn't that nice? Also, in mid-2018, China was working to influence the results of the U.S. midterm elections and later the results of the 2020 presidential election itself. Separately, in mid-2019, the Chinese government's strategy against the United States was focused on undermining domestic confidence in the U.S. president. They wanted to just make you sound like your president wasn't so hot, when actually your president has done a great job, and they did everything possible to do exactly that. Going on, this document says, and this is by the CIA, the strategy included efforts to use Chinese contacts with big U.S. companies to influence U.S. business leaders to turn against the President of the United States of America. The Chinese government sought to identify U.S. journalists who had reported negatively on the U.S. president and pay them large sums of money to write more negative articles about him, as many as they could, and they didn't care what they said. The Chinese government wanted U.S. president to lose the next election, and the reason they wanted me to lose is because they knew I was wise to them, charged them billions and billions of dollars worth of tariffs, and built the strongest military anywhere in the world. We have the strongest military anywhere in the world. These are exact quotes from the CIA reporting. The name of the person doing the quote is now under review, but it gets even worse. Raw intelligence obtained by the FBI in 2020, yet buried by rogue bureaucrats, stated that China's activities even included an attempt to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden. Documents show that during this period, dozens of significant CIA and NSA reports about China's election targeting were kept out of the presidential briefing. These were briefings I would get almost every day. Everything was kept out that was of importance. One email among intelligence analysts admitted that they had, quote, deliberately massaged the presidential daily briefing to withhold information regarding Chinese activities related to the election. Another official inside the FBI wrote that she was running, quote, a shadow government, unquote, to keep intelligence about China's election meddling from becoming known and to keep it away from the honorable press. Other officials who witnessed such efforts perceived the motivations to be blatantly political. Recently, we found significant numbers of burn bags in formation, and this is a group of bags that were used to destroy information given by President Barack Hussein Obama to be burned. It was supposed to be burned. These bags were supposed to be at a different level by different people, incinerated and checked, but it never happened. Maybe we got lucky. We believe this was not done on purpose, but rather through gross incompetence of the people that were supposed to burn the bags. But the findings are stunning. Today, I'm asking the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the CIA to investigate how and why such crucial information was hidden, to fire those involved in the cover-up, and to file criminal charges, if appropriate, against these people. Yet concealing China's meddling was only the beginning. The third set of documents we are releasing proves that for many years, Americans were blatantly lied to about the security of our election infrastructure, including electronic voting machines and ballot counting systems. Dishonest, almost all. They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that. Tonight, we're publishing a series of previously classified U.S. intelligence community assessments and other reports proving that our government has long known these machines are extremely exposed to attack. As one assessment states, we judge that the United States adversaries, including at a minimum Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, as well as non-state groups, have the capability to compromise U.S. election infrastructure. That's unquote, but that's some statement, isn't it, made by supposedly great patriots of our country. The document goes on to further state that, quote, we assess that centralized election-related data repositories, such as voter registration databases, poll books, and other official election websites, are most vulnerable to exploitation, and adversaries could use this access to these systems to disrupt election processes within the United States of America. Tonight, we're releasing all of those findings, and spanning from January 2020 to June 2026, this is a cyber threat aimed at the very heart of our democracy. Many people have questioned whether it could actually be possible to electronically manipulate vote totals or change election results on these terrible machines. Today, we are releasing documents that show the CIA obtained reporting of a specific plot to do a big number in favor of the corrupt Maduro regime in Venezuela, and that's exactly what happened, conspiring to digitally rig their own country's elections in 2020, and that's what they did. This reporting included precise details about methods to regime develop to digitally alter vote totals in ways that could not be detected even with an audit, no matter how deep they went. This intelligence underscores why we must take urgent action to ensure that our own system can never, ever be hacked or compromised like it was in the past. The fourth set of documents reveals that even when significant evidence of fraud has been detected, it has been buried and covered up. Among the disclosures tonight are FBI files detailing evidence of alleged fraud by a large-scale voter registration operation in Michigan. In 2020, Michigan State Police raided a Democrat Get Out the Vote organization, corrupt group in Muskegon. And we're so concerned by what they found. They were just so concerned, they couldn't believe it, actually, that they contacted the FBI in Detroit. The documents state that some canvassers admitted to FBI agents that they signed voter registration forms in other people's names, submitted fraudulent registration for people who did not exist, and received gift cards tied to their number of applications that they produced. In other words, it was pay, play, and cheat. The FBI agents working on the case believe that crimes were committed, yet the Biden Department of Justice slow-walked the investigation and killed it. Tonight, I'm asking the FBI director to ensure that the matter is fully investigated and to work with the Department of Justice to prosecute those responsible for any crimes. Finally, to reveal just how vulnerable our elections continue to be, we are releasing the results of a stunning investigation by the Department of Homeland Security. According to the DHS review of state voter rolls and public records, they identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections. Since Democrat states refuse to share their voter files, the real number is actually much higher than that. Yet, even this limited analysis found more than 250,000 foreigners illegally registered to vote. Put together, these disclosures reveal an election system so broken and so vulnerable that no one can possibly defend it. It is not defensible. Hundreds of millions of U.S. voter files are in the hands of foreign governments. Our machines and ballot counting systems are exposed to hacking and manipulation and corruption. China and other countries have been trying to meddle in our elections. Evidence of fraud has been buried. Hundreds of thousands of non-citizens and dead people are listed and active on the voter rolls, and yet we still have elections with no voter ID, no proof of citizenship, and tens of millions of ballots floating aimlessly through the mail. As one example of the insanity, California's recent election for mayor of LA and governor was held on June 2nd, a long time ago, but it was just completed a few days ago on July 10th. Think of that, much more than 1 month. Took a month to count the votes. I wonder what they were doing. This is worse than any third world country. There's no third world country that has elections like we have. In a rare move, NBC and ABC Fake News have both said that they would not cover this speech. They knew what it was about because of the fact that they don't like the topic, because they know how corrupt our system is and they don't want to reveal it. They and others in the media are part of a plot. They want to continue this fraud for whatever reason. They want to keep it going. They want to protect the radical left. They can't have a great country, and that's true. You can't have a great country without free and fair elections. Fraud like this should mean a revocation of their licenses. They use our public multi-billion-dollar in value airways for absolutely no money. They pay nothing. All we want is honesty in our elections and honesty in reporting. They pay nothing for multi-billion-dollar assets. Great damage has been done to our country, our elections.
You've been listening to President Donald Trump in the East Room addressing what he says is what is necessary to secure American elections. I want to go back to Major Garrett here. You've been listening along with me. He took some big swings at China. He didn't completely walk the line of the promise from the White House to not relitigate 2020.
He came close to it. He didn't use some of the rhetoric he has used in the past, but he inferred that there was still something problematic about that election. We know there was not.
And the claim that there are non-citizens and dead people actively
on voter
voting,
rolls, not substantiated.
Yeah, that is
not substantiated. But he said there are catastrophic vulnerabilities. And Tony, you have to ask yourself, what is that rhetoric about? Is that rhetoric about setting the stage for federal intervention in the midterms? I mean, we've had primary elections all this year. We're going to have more in August. Those primary elections have been conducted under this system that the president said is catastrophically vulnerable. Yet he and all Republicans and Democrats have accepted the elections, the results of those primaries, because they're being carried out according to state law and with resilient and checkable and auditable results.
I want to come back to that national emergency question because Ty Cobb, the president's former personal counsel, said today that he thinks this speech is a predicate to declaring a national emergency. But first, let's talk about the allegations against China. Mm-hmm. If I'm in China right now, I'm sitting up and paying attention because he alleges that China committed the largest compromise of election data in American history.
So the question naturally arises, did the president bring this up with Xi Jinping when he was recently in Beijing? There's no evidence of it. Is the president going to impose tariffs on China as a result of this set of findings? Clearly, this president has no hesitation about using tariffs as a means of statecraft with China. No mention of that either. Are there sanctions or penalties, diplomatic or otherwise, for China because of these discoveries? That's left out of the speech. I think that's an open question.
It's a big question. Let's go to Margaret Brennan, Face the Nation moderator and our chief foreign affairs correspondent. Margaret, great to have you here. This was a really big swing at China. I don't know if the president intended it as such, but it certainly got my attention. What do you make of it?
Well, Tony, there is a lot in here. It's impossible for us to fact check each thing that was said, but on the specific thing in regard to China that you raised, the president was informed when he was president in his first term in a classified memo on January 7th, both the assessments regarding interference, and that was also public prior to that date. So he was aware, and we reported on this network at the time in regard to the assessments as to which foreign countries favored which election candidates. He seems to be alleging there that China actively tried to undermine him and even referenced wanted to get him to resign at one point. Ahead of this, I did reach out to Chinese officials who were already prepared with a prebuttal here. I'll read it to you. The quote is, "China has long adhered to the principle of non-interference in others' internal affairs. The U.S. election is an internal matter, its outcome determined by the American people. China never and will never interfere in the presidential elections of the United States." Now, what was assessed by the intelligence community and made public as recently as I'm looking at April 2020. I want to read for you what was in the National Intelligence Council. It said Chinese intelligence officials analyzed multiple states' election voter registration data to conduct public opinion analysis on the 2020 U.S. general election. So public opinion analysis is what the U.S. intelligence community said the Chinese were doing. The president is alleging something far more aggressive there in actively undermining his presidency. And I think, Tony, the question for tomorrow will continue to be, and so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
As Major said in regard to Xi Jinping, I did reach out to ask the embassy if, for example, the White House had given the embassy a heads up that this shot across the bow was going to be taken. I was told no outreach to the ambassador. I have reached out to our American ambassador in Beijing at this hour. I have not heard back as to his assessment of what that will do to U.S. relations. But there's going to be much more we will have on Face the Nation on Sunday as we try to unpack all of these allegations.
Really interesting. Let's broaden out the conversation a little bit, bring in David Becker. He's a CBS News election law expert and political contributor. He's also the co-author of The Big Truth, Upholding Democracy in the Age of the Big Lie. David, very glad to have you here. 220 million, that's a very big number. And there's a lot in this speech that I know you're going to want to grab onto, and we'll get to other aspects of it as well, in particular, these vulnerabilities on voting machines. But just sticking with China for a moment as we move through this systematically. If China has this information, how significant is that for people at home?
Yeah, it sounds bad when you hear about it, right? That voter data is available to China. But the reality is voter files in the United States are public. The basic information in that, your name, your address, if you register with a political party, as many people do in some states, whether you voted in a particular election or not, that's public. And the reason for that is the parties and campaigns want that information to engage in voter outreach. There are states like Ohio and North Carolina that literally have it up on the web. You can Google it right now and you can get it for free. You can get 1 out of 10 records in the United States from the California Secretary of State right now for $100. It's widely available to many. I think most in the election world have always assumed that nation states and others were accessing this information. There's nothing that anyone can actually do with that information. It's not like you could affect a voter with that information. It's not like you could change their voter registration with this public data. It's not like you could vote on behalf of that voter. It's kind of like I might have the entire class list for a college or university, but that doesn't mean I can go in and change the grades. And that's what's happening here. This is not really a big concern. And as Margaret just pointed out, this is not new information. We've known that China and perhaps other adversaries were collecting information on this for years. And certainly we have that memo from April of 2020 that indicates the intelligence community clearly told the president and others in leadership about this, about China doing this.
David, thank you very much. Let's bring in Michael Sobolik. He's a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute specializing in U.S.-China relations. Michael, thank you very much for joining us. We just heard Margaret Brennan say that this is not particularly new. We also heard David Becker say it's not significant. As you've been listening along and processing what the president said, where do you come down on it?
The fact that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to get information about Americans is the easiest thing in the world to believe, because the CCP is a data vacuum. They're out to learn everything about Americans. But let's step back here. I think the president is right to warn about China's attempts to influence American politics, but he risks walking into a trap that could benefit Beijing. If he's really serious when he says that the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping tried to weaken his first presidency, why is he talking about stable great power relationships with China right now? Why did he allow TikTok to remain under Chinese Communist Party control with its algorithm? Why is he sending high-end AI chips to China? It introduces a lot of questions about, if he's so concerned about this, why is he approaching China the way he is, in a highly transactional way? And the trap is this. If we blame each other, meaning if we blame other Americans for what foreign powers are trying to do here at home and we turn on each other, that's exactly what China wants. So he needs to be really careful with how he addresses his responses to this.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It is now 9:30 in the East. If viewers are just tuning in, we previewed and then took a small amount of the president's speech tonight on election security and integrity, free and fair elections. The president saying that there are catastrophic problems and laying out some of his allegations, not completely keeping to a promise he made earlier about not relitigating 2020, but that's not the most surprising thing in the world. We should expect it. Joining us now is CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd. Sam, as we digest all this with the people at home, those just joining us and those who have been with us since 9 a.m., you hear things like declassified intelligence, and that's got the freight and the force of the federal government behind it. Sounds powerful, sounds certain. You know about what goes into these documents. How reliable are they?
Well, it depends on what kind of intelligence we're talking about. The intelligence community for years has provided what we call coordinated intelligence assessments that really provide a summary of the majority view within the intelligence community on issues, for example, like election interference. And I will note that despite what President Trump just alleged, the underlying assessment by the intelligence community remains that we have no indication that any foreign actor attempted to alter any technical aspect of the voting process in the 2020 election. That is a coordinated view within the intelligence community that is based on the collection of a lot of different intelligence, vetting that intelligence, and then letting experts, not people that just joined the intelligence community yesterday, but actual experts assign confidence levels to that assessment. They have high confidence, medium confidence, low confidence. What I'm concerned about, and we have to certainly look at the documents that the executive branch has just declassified, is whether we're talking about coordinated assessments or, for example, what we call raw intelligence, which could be from a single source with a bias or a particular vendetta. So it really depends on the kind of intelligence that we're talking about, whether it was coordinated and what confidence levels we have.
And very quickly, Tony, to underscore the point that the White House made today in its briefing, it is not alleging that China or any other foreign adversary infiltrated any system in our country, compromised a single vote, or materially affected any election outcome ever. That's really important.
Yeah.
Vulnerabilities matter. That is important. But have they been taken to the next most important, scariest level? And the administration is saying, no, it has not.
But when you talk about the scariest level, it goes to the question of what we're all doing here and what the president is doing with our attention and time. He's making a speech leading people to the conclusion that there are catastrophic vulnerabilities that have been exploited, when in fact that is not the case. Our elections, upon which our entire system depends, have been running smoothly and securely. There is not strong evidence of votes being changed, of non-citizens altering the outcome of elections. These things have not happened, and yet we're having this broader conversation. I want to get into one of the other, I think, quite explosive allegations from the president about voting machines and vulnerabilities. I have been up close to these voting machines. They are like the Zoran machine from Big. They're not plugged in. They're not on the internet. No, I mean, they're isolated boxes with jump drives on the side. So the idea that somebody on the outside can hack in is hard to believe. Is he describing something new that I didn't encounter, or what do you hear in that?
I hear that there is an assessment that in an abstract experiment, it was found that one type of machine might be vulnerable. One type of machine. Okay. But as you said, it's not connected broadly. We have a decentralized election system in our country. And most importantly, Tony, 95% of all ballots in this country are cast with a paper auditable trail. Meaning, if there's any discrepancy that any candidate wants to raise about the results of an election, and also remember, processing and counting is observed by election observers for both parties.
Right.
As it happens, they're in the room always. If there's a discrepancy, you have a means by which to test the data in the machine against an auditable paper ballot. That is a secure mechanism to verify and validate voter intent. We're not living in the world of 2000 with hanging chads any longer.
Right.
We have solved that problem. We have addressed it. That was a genuine vulnerability that held up the declaration of the President of the United States for many weeks. We all remember it, those of us who lived through that. We're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So when the President talks about theoretical machine vulnerabilities, that's precisely what it is, a theoretical vulnerability that has mechanisms behind it to backstop what the voter intent actually was.
Yeah, theoretical. We're going to get to the non-citizen registrations that he brought up, but I want to go back to Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan here on this question of what we're all doing here, why the president is focusing attention on this, whether it's really about the past or actually about the future, and what we saw in hearings this week, for example, nominees of the president unable to answer the question of who won the 2020 election. There is something here that is unacknowledged and won't be acknowledged by the president and his allies. Is tonight an effort to buttress that, or is it something else? You have these conversations on Sunday. I'm really curious what you're hearing.
The president, since he lost the 2020 election, has continued to say he won it, despite all of what Major laid out, the court cases, the reports, the information shared with the public. So he has never given up that ghost, despite facts. In terms of his motivations, you could connect those dots. In terms of the spin forward of, so what are you going to do if, in fact, the election system is as vulnerable as you claim? Now, Tony, if we take the president at his word that that is the intent to secure our elections and thus drive up confidence in that machinery of the democratic process, then you would also raise questions, Tony, like why did he cut 1,000 people, a third of the workforce at the domestic agency charged with protecting cyber infrastructure, known as CISA? A third. Why did the Director of National Intelligence Office eliminate the Foreign Malign Influence Center division along with layoffs more broadly there? Why at the State Department did they eliminate the office that countered foreign influence? If the president's intention is to counter that, as he gestured to with the China allegations, with the Venezuela allegations, why would you get rid of the people whose job it is to counter those things? So that's a big question I'm sure a lot of lawmakers will be asking. I have the vice chair of the Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner, joining my program Sunday, and I'm sure we will talk about that. But I also want to bring up some of the intelligence that the president referenced, because CBS on our website, so many of our reporters here do great work behind the scenes trying to chase down and really just fact check things. Our Sarah Lynch, our Jake Rosen covering the Justice Department point out to me that when the president alluded to a group of bags found by the government from Obama's presidency that were burned, when he talked about don't trust the deep state, that information was pulled back by the FBI. It was looked at. The president has talked about it for years and years. Nobody has ever been criminally charged in that probe. So some of what was presented as new has been fact-checked and run down, and I would encourage people to look at some of our great reporting on the website that can really detail some of that, as well as the already public documents, including what Director Ratcliffe at the CIA has just published, referencing back to objections he had back in 2020 that have been public since the Senate Intelligence Committee asked for a review of it.
Margaret, thank you. And in fact, our viewers will not have to wait until Sunday. Mark Warner is going to be on the line and joining us shortly, I'm told. But for the moment, I want to go back to David Becker, shifting gears a little bit, and talk about the vulnerabilities alleged around certain voting machines. David, this is your opportunity to correct me here. These voting machines, the ones that I have encountered, they have a little jump drive on the side. They don't have an internet connection. And if you were going to hack them, you would have to Tom Cruise your way down and float over it and then put in another jump drive. But even that wouldn't work because there's a box underneath with paper duplicates. And if it doesn't match the electronic record, what are you going to do? I mean, you're busted already.
Tony, I'm not going to correct you. You have it exactly right, and Major had it exactly right. And what you didn't see is the chain of custody that is maintained around these machines at all times. They are under lock and key until they are publicly tested to make sure they haven't been tampered with. And then they are used, and we still don't trust them. We have those paper ballots that we go back and audit by hand to make sure they've counted correctly. The president mentioned this alleged hypothetical vulnerability related to a voting machine company that is associated with Venezuela. That voting machine company doesn't have any machines in the United States except in Los Angeles County, in one county. No other county in the entire country uses machines from that particular company. And it was alleged that this was unknown, that this was kept secret for some time. There was literally litigation that's been gone on over the last 10 years. Ask the election officials in the state of Georgia. This has been publicly discussed for some time. We acknowledge that voting machines, like all technology, have some vulnerabilities associated with them. Nothing is perfectly secure, and we don't trust them. Voting machines are more secure than almost any other technology because they're kept under strict lock and key. They're not connected to the internet, and because we have those paper ballots that we go back to an audit to confirm the results. We all remember in Georgia, they counted those paper ballots. 5 million of them in 5 days after the election, and they confirmed those results were entirely accurate.
But David, here's the one thing that I think a lot of viewers will hear and walk away from tonight remembering and fearing: the notion that there are 250,000 non-citizens registered to vote. No matter how good your machine is, if that ballot goes in, it's going to count it. When you hear 250,000 non-citizens registered to vote, I don't see any way, shape, or form where we could say that's a good thing. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all, we should take that with a great big grain of salt because the administration has not shown its work with regard to these at all. Where it did show its work is it has looked at 68 million records from states using high-quality data and has found only 28,000, that's 0.04%, that may be non-citizens. We have followed, my organization, my nonprofit, the Center for Election Innovation Research, has followed these claims, and even that is an overstatement because DHS admits, they publicly state that their data is incomplete. They don't have complete citizenship data in the United States. And so they have some false flags. The 250,000 number, that's based on using commercial data that cannot be used. It's going to create a ton of false positives. I guarantee you they will not. That data includes a ton of people, maybe even a majority of people who are absolutely eligible voters, and states would probably be breaking the law if they remove those voters from the rolls because they're eligible American voters that should be on the list.
And remember, Tony, this is a point that can be litigated by any candidate. Any candidate who has a reasonable belief that non-citizens voted in an election in which they were involved, they can take that evidence, if they find it, to court.
Yeah.
That's a point of litigation. So it's not as if their presence on voter rolls, A, confirms that they participate, or that that vote was counted. But even if there's a suspicion about that, then you can litigate that because you have observers in the room. Again, I want to remind people, in every election in our country, smallest jurisdiction, parties are allowed to have observers watching the process. If there's anything amiss, you can litigate it. And you can bring this to court and you can bring your evidence. So it's not a vulnerability that has no remedy. It has a real, genuine remedy if you can prove it.
Well, remedies is actually where I want to go next. I want to bring in Ed O'Keefe, senior White House and political correspondent. Ed, the president's remedy here, we know he wants the Save America Act passed, which would require proof of citizenship to vote. That is one definite way to prevent non-citizens from voting, and yet this doesn't have traction in the Senate. Why not, and what happens next in the aftermath of this speech?
Yeah, so this bill is essentially designed to establish national standards for voting across the country by, in essence, penalizing states that don't participate. The problem is, or the challenge, or perhaps the beauty, depending on how you look at this, is that the Constitution says states conduct elections as they see fit. And so there's a legal challenge potentially to this already. But politically on Capitol Hill, there is not enough support. Remember, in the Senate, you've got to get to 60 votes. Republicans can't find a handful of Democrats to join them in this because they have concerns about the proof of citizenship aspects and the idea of voter ID laws being more stringent than many believe is necessary. So Republicans have told the White House repeatedly over the last several months, you do not have the votes to make this happen, sir. It won't apply to the 2026 elections anyway. We have other things that we should be focused on instead. But this speech was designed to build pressure on fellow Republicans to act in the few days left they have before they head home for August and most of September to begin campaigning. We are expecting to hear more from the Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin tomorrow in a briefing here at the White House about how exactly the administration's tackling some of what's been released. And the White House tonight published at least 400 documents that are about 3 inches tall if they were to be stacked for people to review for themselves on the White House website. All of it designed to show their work, even though, as we've been discussing, much of this was already well known, much of it had been published before. Tony?
Ed, thank you very much. As promised, Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner is with us now. He is vice chair of the Senate Intel Committee. Senator Warner, did you hear anything that to your ears was new tonight?
No. And a matter of fact, before I start, as an American, not as an elected official, I was embarrassed that the President of the United States went before our whole country and networks like yours carried this as news, as opposed to a rehash of falsehoods. And it is incumbent upon you and any responsible journalist to push back on these falsehoods. I've been either chairman or vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee for the last decade.
If I may, on that point, since you raised it.
If I may just finish, sir, if we don't call into question these falsehoods, this president is he's going to lose a free and fair election. And unless responsible journalists and the American people step up and say, our system, which has stood the test of time, is not going to be undermined by this kind of falsehoods, then, we all will have to live with those responsibilities.
Senator, what I wanted to interject is you are calling for context and analysis and pushback. You are on the show right now giving it and acting as though it's not happening. So I just want to underscore that the reason you're on is because we agree, you and I, that this is a vitally, vitally important topic, and the president has a terrible track record on it, as we said at the top, and as we've been trying to buttress and fact check and give context and analysis for throughout.
Where would you like me to start on the level of falsehood, just incredible lies? Let's start with the initial comments about China in 2018-20. All of this took place under Donald Trump's administration. His current CIA director was the director of national intelligence. We have 18 intelligence agencies. They all collect information from thousands of sources every day. Their job is to do an honest analysis of what's true or false. They came to a complete conclusion that while there's efforts by governments, he mentioned China a lot. He didn't mention Russia, which wanted him to win, or Iran, which was against him. They try to dissemble and put out propaganda. They try to amplify on social media in many ways. That did not change any votes. The efforts to try to actually interfere did not change any votes. That was the conclusion driven by the Trump administration, national intelligence leaders, that was presented to Donald Trump on January 7th. Now, 5.5 years later, he's making these baseless claims. Virtually every document he has cited, the Intelligence Committee, in a bipartisan way, has seen and reviewed. If there are individual analysts talking to each other that were not part of a conclusion, we'll look at those. But the whole notion, as I mentioned earlier, you get thousands of inputs. The job of the intelligence community is put these together and come up with a conclusion. And what has been so, just makes me crazy is that we've seen in this administration over the last year, when people speak truth to power and tell the truth, for example, the general that was in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he said that, hey, when we first bombed Iran, their nuclear sites, we did a pretty good job, but we didn't obliterate them, as Trump said. he spoke the truth, he got fired. We obviously didn't obliterate him since we're still at war with Iran. You know, when he talks about the idea that somehow these countries are gathering voter files, these are publicly available. You don't have to hack into them. You can buy them.
So, Senator.
So I've never seen a comments like this from a president of the United States. Doesn't matter what party. That's nothing to do with party. That is so less connected to truth than this. And if we don't step up, and you guys as journalists and people across the political aisle stand up and say our election integrity is too important to mess around with, then shame on all of us.
Senator, what I hear you saying on the 220 million voter files that the president says China has accessed is that those are public documents and that's not a big deal. I hear that answer. I
can tell you this. Russia has probably got more. Iran has been doing it. Russia's done this much more actively for years. And I mean, and for both 2016 and 2020, he forgets to admit the fact that Russia wanted Trump to win. Iran, to his credit, was against Trump. China was kind of mixed, but you know, this is not some great breakthrough that other countries and virtually
Senator,
every American company that tries to reach out to Americans buys the voter files to contact Americans.
Senator, on the other point the president is pushing about non-citizens on the rolls, he extrapolates out to 250,000. The actual number was 28,000. Whatever the number is, do you think either one is true? And does it concern you?
Do I think that when people are registered to vote, that people are not qualified to vote, get registered at times? Yeah, but at any level, the idea you're going to extrapolate a number across the country, and many people, there was a review on one of these that said, some of these people that said they were non-citizens because the national database they use at DHS is outdated. Most of them actually had become citizens. So this whole obsession about non-citizens voting, this has been reviewed by your network, by independent groups, I believe even by Fox, that have said, you know, does anybody slip through? But is the numbers significant? Does anything change or affect any election? Show me any legitimate group from left to right that says that takes place. And the idea that somehow, this is the part that I just would ask you to please look into. There were so many things, and this is the irony, that were set up in the first Trump administration to protect our elections. The Foreign Malign Influence Center, the CISA Cybersecurity Agency, the Elections Assistance Commission. Donald Trump's team in his second administration has dismantled all of these. Recently, he took the Elections Assistance Commission and fired the Democrats, forced the Republican to resign, and that group was to work with all of these states and their local registrars on how we do better protections.
Yeah.
One of the greatest strengths of our system is that our elections are not nationalized. They are local and state-run, and that goes back to the Constitution, and that has been a strength of ours, not a weakness.
Senator, I appreciate you coming on. I think this interview has been a strength of ours. Thank you for your time, and I know you'll be talking more tomorrow and to Margaret on Sunday. I appreciate it. With me now is conservative journalist John Solomon. He is an advisor to the president, to President Trump. He's leading a government transparency task force for the White House. He's also the man behind a lot of the research and the reporting that the president cited as true in this speech tonight. John, you heard the president. You also heard the senator say none of it is true or not new or not significant, and others have said that as well. Your response?
Well, listen, I talked to the intelligence chiefs in the last few days as we got prepared for this. It's very important to understand, the president said this tonight, every intelligence chief vetted this speech. They made sure it was accurate. They told me they had never been briefed on the size of the breaches, the 230 million Americans, the 220 million Americans whose data was stolen, that they consider it a security breach. How many times on your network have you reported that 5 countries are capable of hacking our election machines? When is the last time you reported that Venezuela actually succeeded in breaching a machine which has implications for our future security. You haven't because it was never made public. It has not been made to Congress. It's not been told to the president in the past. We checked the presidential daily briefs. A president was kept from this information. Now we have a chance to fix a glass chin of election security, make the 26th election more secure than the last 3.
John, did the president, in his address tonight, we know he likes to ad-lib, did he overstep the information that you provided to him in any way, shape, or form?
Not that I've seen. I mean, I have to go back and compare everything, but no, I think the president stayed right where the intelligence community gave us this information, where it resides, and that is we had a glass chin. We knew our election machines are vulnerable. We didn't patch them. We knew 230 million Americans' voter data was stolen by Chinese spies. Now think about this. When Equifax had the 147 million person breach 10 years ago, it was one of the biggest stories, one of the biggest data breaches. This is larger than that. A foreign enemy has the ability now to register American voters, and that is something that concerned the intelligence committee. Thousands of pages of reports that we went through. We put several hundred of them out tonight. But if all of us are worried about when our bank account gets compromised, we should be just as worried when our voter file gets compromised, because it may affect a future election.
So what's the president's next move here tonight?
He laid out several steps. One of them is for tomorrow, the Homeland Security Secretary to begin briefing reporters at the White House on what the machine fixes are. Patches, very simple things that will fix those machines. By the way, the first people to raise concerns about the very patches we're talking about, 2 Democratic senators back in 2019. But these are going to get fixed now, 7 years later. The second thing is the Homeland Security Department needs to figure out what to do to make sure we can deal with this identity theft, so that when people vote, they are the person they say they are, and some foreigner hasn't monkeyed with the system. And then third, he made very clear the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, they have to go back and find out why the intelligence analysts kept this from a president, kept this from a Congress, kept this from the American people. I have found no evidence in all the documents the intelligence committee gave me that people like Senator Mark Warner knew about this. Now, if he knew about it, maybe he should have told us earlier.
But John, you know, the voting rolls that China has allegedly compromised, they are public rolls. That's the information.
No, they're not all.
They're not all. Okay. So then tell me this.
No, they're not.
What could China potentially do? Because this is the headline that comes out of this tonight: 220 million compromised voter rolls. What can China potentially do, from your understanding, with those with that information?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tony. When your reporters look at the National Intelligence Council assessment from January of 2020, there are 6 things it was assessed. This means all the intelligence community agrees together. 6 things they can do. They can vote in your name, and you would show up one day and you wouldn't be able to vote because they'll tell you someone else voted for you. They could register you in another location. You would never know that they voted for you in another location because they have all your data, everything they need to fill out a legitimate registration form. They could go and change something on your address, and when you showed up with your ballot or with your ID, like, oh, you're not that person, you're registered at another address. All of those things were imagined by our intelligence community. They warned about it. They called it the softest of vulnerabilities, the most severe vulnerabilities our system had. It gets hacked, and then they don't tell any of us. You know, we get informed when our bank accounts are taken. Why shouldn't we get informed when our voter records were taken?
Well, we're getting informed tonight. John, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're in our closing minutes here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to David Becker in a second, but something that we've talked about, Major, and Kamala Harris just posted online that the president's goals here are to try to discourage people so they don't turn up in November. But what's really interesting is, and we've talked about this, for all the doubt that people have in our system, they continue to churn out by the tens of millions to vote and make their voices heard.
2020, 2024, highest turnout in presidential elections in 100 years. The midterms, 2018, 2022, highest in 60 years. We are turning out a lot. One thing, with John Sullivan, he's going to represent the information. Could, did. There's an enormous gap between could and did. The administration is not asserting did, only could.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean could is not important, but did is the key.
Yeah, I want to go to David Becker very quickly, David. We've got about a minute left here. What should viewers take away from tonight?
Well, this administration has been in total control of the federal government for 18 months. They have redirected untold taxpayer resources to try to uncover evidence of massive voter fraud, directed agencies to do this for 18 months. They've been spreading these lies about the election for longer than that. And at the end of that 18 months, all we got is more rehashed, debunked conspiracy theories, many of which we've known about before and already knew didn't affect our elections. And hopefully this is the end of it, because I think Americans are tired of hearing us, slander the public servants who run elections so well in our country and continue to do that.
Well, there have been many moments over the past 6 years where I thought it was the end of this conversation, and the conversation continues. Here we are again. David Becker, thank you very much. Major Garrett, thank you very much. Sam Vinograd, Ed O'Keefe, and Margaret as well, and Senator Warner. To recap, the president just delivered an address to the nation in which he made some very big claims about Chinese attempts at election meddling, the security of our voting infrastructure, and saying hundreds of thousands of people are on the voting rolls when they shouldn't be. There are big questions. You've heard about them tonight. We'll continue reporting on them. Our coverage will continue. Your local news is next. And tomorrow on the CBS Morning News, this has been a CBS Special Report.